the emergence of digital opinion leaders, a new avatar coming up in key opinion advocacy. So this session has a variety. This session is talking about change. This session is going to give you metrics which will make you realize why we should follow this change, why we should be moving to digital things coming in healthcare, why should we should be adopting them. So the speaker for today is Dr. Karthik Anantharaman, and I am in a hurry to introduce him because he is one of the people I follow. Dr. Karthik Anantharaman is a director of e-pharmacy and private label business at Medlife, and most recently he has joined Roche. So we congratulate him on joining the company. Karthik is a trained medical doctor with a degree in internal medicine and surgery from Bangalore University. Karthik is the recipient of 30 top influencers in Indian healthcare industry, January 2020, most influential marketing leaders, listing by World Marketing Congress twice in a row in November 2015 and 2016, leading industry awards from Frost & Sullivan, Economic Times, Best Healthcare Brands and Brand Trust Awards 2016. He was earlier the head of business unit at Biocon Limited, and he was earlier the chief marketing officer of BPL Medical Technologies and Penlon Limited, Goldman Sachs portfolio company. Karthik was one of the core team members responsible for the launch of South Asia's first patented primary care pharmaceutical brand, Januvia, which later went on to become the largest pharmaceutical launch of South Asia in 2008 and 9. And he also had a stint as an entrepreneur, launching one of India's first chronic disease management companies in 2010-11. So I welcome you, Dr. Karthik, on this forum. It is a pleasure hosting you. And we are very eager to hear what are your views related to this digital opinion leader transition that is happening in the industry and that should be adopted by companies, pharma companies now. So Dr. Karthik, welcome to this forum. We would like you to please take us ahead in this session.
Dr. Swati, thank you so much. And Dr. Satish, I thank you as well, Pharma State. And I must acknowledge my very dear colleague, Mr. Pankaj Srivastav. I think he made a mention about digital opinion leaders in one of his previous sessions on this same forum on Pharma State. And I think thanks to him, this session is happening live today. First of all, thanks for the opportunity. But having said that, I think I liked one thing that you said, Dr. Swati. You said change is something that we're looking at. And in my mind, change is constant. So we are seeing an unprecedented digital transformation in healthcare. And I think the emergence of the digital opinion leader is one significant step in that direction. So having said that, so therefore, what are the changes that are actually happening as a part of digital opinion leadership? So that is precisely what I'm going to be discussing now. So let me share my screen. I prepared a small presentation to show you.
Sure, Karthik, please.
I hope my screen is visible.
Yes.
And what I'd like to do is, before I start discussing about digital opinion leaders, I'd like to start the presentation with discussing the known triad of relationship between the three stakeholders, right? Now, all of us, I think, who worked with several healthcare companies, we always mention that patient is in the center of everything that we do, and everything that we do needs to be patient-centric. But the way how the world is emerging now is based on a digital relationship between the patient, the caregiver, that is the physician or the doctor, and I've written pharmacist there, but the pharmacist could be pharmacy, could be a hospital, could be a medical technology or a medical devices company. So any service provider would fall into that third quadrant there. Now, while patient is certainly in the center of everything we do, the new norm is that data is in the center of everything that we do, and data drives decisions. So we are going to see the emergence of what we call data science. And data science, as we know, is a very evolved analytical science in several other industries, but healthcare in a way is kind of lagging behind. The reason being, we did not have databases traditionally maintained in healthcare. Still, we see people carrying reams and reams of paper, which are different reports over different periods of time. I still see people carrying those large printouts of CT scans and MRI scans and X-rays, and people waiting in queues to collect those reports. I think we have to kind of get over all these. There is no need to print X-rays, CTs, MRI scans anymore. There is no need to print lab reports anymore. Everything can be on a cloud. Everything can be accessed as a soft copy. And that makes life so much easy for a doctor, where you can see sequential data on the EMR or the electronic medical records. Not only sequential recording is important, but looking at the trend line as to how these parameters have been trending over several months gives even better insights for a more informed clinical decision making to the doctor. And for the patient, he doesn't have to remember where he kept his file, as long as it is secure on the cloud. So I think we are moving towards data science. Artificial intelligence led data science is what is going to lead. It's going to be the front end of what healthcare is going to get into. So in the next couple of slides, I will show you what are the data points. And by the way, I have made this presentation completely based on data which is available in public domain. So I'm more than happy to share this presentation with Dr. Swati and team, and people can access it. So we have seen that global pharma companies have made good inroads in actually defining value proposition beyond the pill. So we have seen large companies looking at how we can create value and capture a value beyond the pill. And they see a lot of value in seeing that it has a great potential to better health outcomes, increase brand loyalty, and easier access to therapy. But all of these, so we need to be able to measure what is the meaning of better health outcome. We need to be able to measure objectively what is the baseline versus increased brand loyalty. And we need to also digitally enable access to therapy. And I can tell you that during the pandemic, during the lockdown, the traffic went up for online pharmacies by almost 3 to 5-fold, okay? The kind of demand that people saw in e-commerce was unprecedented, okay? And companies that are offering online consultations, like be it Practo or Librate or DocSap or Instadoc, they have seen an unprecedented almost 600% growth in the number of teleconsultations that people availed, because people knew that digital is easy, fast, and it certainly enables access. So therefore, there is already a precedence of global pharma companies leveraging digital to be able to offer more than this one. So, and you can see some of the global large companies who have been trying to do this. And beyond the pharma, as you can see, there are quite a few things, very good trends that are happening in terms of Internet of Things specific to healthcare. But if you see, healthcare ranks number 3 in terms of an industry that is ready to adopt Internet of Things or digital transformation. But I think we are fast catching up. Yeah. So telecom is the first, hospitality is the second, healthcare being ranked the third. But yes, there is going to be a fast catch up. Now, it is not just pharma that defines healthcare, but because beyond pharma, there is healthcare services, there are medical technologies, and that leads to the emergence of what we call wearables or wearable health. And you can see here something called APIs. And all of us in pharma are used to understanding API as active pharma ingredient, but the API mentioned on this slide is not the active pharma ingredient API. It is actually the API mentioned in the app, the healthcare app. And API is that source code at which you can actually do tech integration between a device, a healthcare app, and a cloud, or any other information service system or information technology system. So beyond pharma, there is an emergence of wearable tech. There is a emergence of wearable tech connection to cloud through API, etc. And we are seeing an unprecedented growth in that. And where does all of that lead to? All of that in turn is leading to the utilization of virtual reality and augmented reality by doctors in healthcare. And you can actually see what is the growth that is expected in the next about 5 years, where augmented reality and virtual reality, and I can give you live examples. By the way, in Bangalore itself, there are 2 or 3 good startups, incubated startups, who actually have fantastic VR technologies to train new obstetricians and gynecologists that want to train themselves in vitro fertilization technique, right? And there are great companies who are offering virtual reality based training on minimally invasive robotic surgery, which can actually, where the robotic arm is actually in a distant place and the doctor is actually able to do a minimally invasive surgery using virtual, I mean, he gets trained on virtual reality and he's able to manage a distant robotic surgery. So that way there is going to be a significant change that medical devices and medical technology would undergo in terms of becoming connected devices. And what does all of that lead to? At the end of the day, data becomes king. So, gone are the days when it used to be said that, oil was the real wealth, or gold and platinum was the real wealth. So the new wealth is going to be data. And the amount of money that people will be spending to buy data and buy the insights that is gained from data is going to be humongous, and healthcare is going to be no different. You can see here, already medical devices are accumulating so much of that data. They're generating so much of data. You can see each medical device, there's a study that says can generate up to 1,000 parameters per second of data, producing almost 1 million data points per day. But all of these data points for years and years have been lost. Imagine if this data were to be resting on a cloud, and if each data were to be identified with a specific patient, and we are getting there. So the National Digital Health Mission precisely wants to do that. It wants to give a unique ID, a health ID number, like an Aadhaar number, to every individual. And if every unique health ID can be linked to the patient's health data, the possibilities of that is actually tremendous. And by the way, I'll be showing that in one of the upcoming slides as well. And at the end of the day, that is going to define the entire healthcare IoT ecosystem. Now, is there data to show that we are ready? So are patients ready to digitally receive healthcare? Are doctors ready to digitally provide healthcare? And are pharma companies, medical device companies, hospitals ready to provide their products or services in a digitally enabled format? The answer is yes. I think we are almost there. And this leads, and this is the data point you can actually see, that patients are very much looking forward to receiving medication-related information, chronic disease condition-related information, and healthcare services. So teleconsultation, telemedicine falls under this ambit using digitally enabled services. And they're looking at multiple different channels to gain this information. There was a very interesting study that IQVIA, the ORGIMS as we traditionally call it as, they did it during the COVID lockdown to just see how ready are Indian doctors to receive scientific information or clinical information from medical representatives from the companies, from pharma companies. So because it led to a condition where doctors were no longer able to see medical reps the way how they used to see in the past. And this IQVIA study was actually conducted across the country with responses from over 500 doctors across 16 specialties in all the metros and tier 1 cities. Pharma companies have become, what the study revealed is that they have become more aggressive in contacting physicians, with almost 79% of doctors being contacted digitally. Now, majority of the doctors being visited by the companies that were visiting, 64% were actually visiting, Indian pharma company reps were visiting doctors, and about 36% of multinationals were visiting. These are the top companies that they recalled. Now, however, the top 3 forms of engagement that doctors look forward to from pharma companies were 78% through telephone contact, and another 78% through WhatsApp and email, and 68% did share useful content through all these digital media, which doctors do appreciate. And post-lockdown, we do see that doctors prefer to adopt a combination of both face-to-face and digital interaction. So we used to always have doctors with 4 visits, 3 visits, 2 visits, and a single visit, depending on the their tier classification, like a tier 1 doctor, a tier 2, or a tier 3 doctor, or classification of doctors. So, but now I think that gets redefined, where doctors would like to have, of course, a combination of face-to-face, but with lesser frequency, lesser intervals, and significantly augmented or substitute multiple face-to-face with digital interactions. But what is more important is, what do doctors like to receive from pharma companies in a digital information format? If pharma companies were to restrict themselves only to discussing their own product, I think very few doctors would like to look at that. What doctors would like to see is a combination of value-added services, where they wish to know what are the recent trends and information that will help in their clinical practice and help them revive their clinical practice and bring it back to the normal as what it used to be before the pandemic. They also want certain service related support as well. And of course, there is product related information. And there are quite a few companies who are doing very good trainings on telemedicine, because there are quite a few doctors who are using telemedicine platforms for the very first time. They've never used a teleconsultation app. So companies are actually guiding them, taking them through formal training programs on the nuances of using telemedicine apps, telemedicine platform, which is a great value add. And that really supports a doctor during these times. And doctors' interaction during lockdown were primarily through phone calls, as we know. So during the lockdown, 88% phone calls, WhatsApp, e-consultations getting used as well. And you can see how the mix is expected to change post that. But what is very, very critical is the emergence of telemedicine or teleconsultation. Now, this emergence of telemedicine or teleconsultation is possibly the very first step in defining who can emerge as a digital opinion leader. So that brings me to our core topic of the emergence of the digital opinion leader or digital opinion influencer. And as all of us know, opinion leadership, the definition of opinion leadership would not change. The qualification criteria of whom to be defined as an opinion leader also would not change. So as we know, the simple definition of an opinion leader is the process by which one person informally influences the consumption actions or attitudes of others who may be opinion seekers or who may be opinion recipients. But what are those key things that determine an opinion leader? First is trust. So the person should be the credibility of the person should be very high in the industry. Anything that the person mentions should be completely based on evidence and based on science. It should be analytical. It should have insights coming from data what the doctors present. And as I mentioned, it should confront the facts. Any fact which does not have it's not backed by evidence is something that opinion leaders generally do not subscribe to. And most importantly, all opinion leaders are extremely sensitive that they do not really give way to editorialization biases, or they don't really promote anything which is a preliminary conclusion. So therefore, that is typically what determines what an industry leader is. So in the influence mapping, as we know, so we used to call this communities of practice in one of the previous organizations. So typically, this is the influence mapping that key opinion leaders were generally used to. But what is leading to the emergence of a digital opinion leader, right? So the emergence of a digital opinion leader can be best described, by what we see here in terms of the generation profile. So people, who are actually, we have these 4 generations of people. The baby boomers were the ones who were born in the 50s and 60s. The Gen X were the ones, so who are actually born, between 65 and 79. The millennials are the ones who are born in 80 to 94. And Gen Z are the ones who were born between 95 and 2015. Now, why is this important? Because this determines what is the age group of the doctor whom we are meeting as pharma people. And at the same time, what is the, how open are doctors in different age groups to be able to use digital medium to communicate and to share their thoughts and ideas, right? So therefore, we clearly now see that most doctors whom we meet, the HODs, etc., are typically in the Gen X, and most of the upcoming doctors are in the millennial age group. And we will see the Gen Z coming into the network scene soon. So therefore, that is what actually helps determine a key, opinion leader. And there we clearly see that, in terms of the metrics that determines a digital opinion leader. So most important is the metric number 1 that determines a digital opinion leader is, do they post about relevant content? Do they have a peer review or a public following? Are they trusted amongst their peers? Are they active online regardless of their HCP role? Do they have a public influence? And what exactly is their social media presence? And do they have existing relationship with the company? I think these are the things that determine the role of a digital opinion leader. Now, what are the tools that digital opinion leaders use typically? Now, it has been proven through science and through data that Twitter is the most influential digital medium that is currently available, okay? And that is what most of the, social media research and digital media research has revealed. And post-Twitter, blogging is seen as the second best. And there is also data to prove that when the number of followers exceeds, like 500,000, which is like a 500,000 followers, that is when it actually catches the attention of the media, it catches the attention of most of the large organizations. So Twitter followed by blogging, followed by vlogger. So vlogger is basically is a video blogger. And video blogging is now actually, YouTube is the leading one. And there are other channels that are now available as well. And of course, eventually Facebook and LinkedIn are seen as the very credible media to actually look at digital opinion, this one. Now, having defined who a digital opinion leader is, what tells us that who is a stronger digital opinion leader and who's an emerging digital opinion leader? And that is measured by impact. And the impact of a digital opinion leader can be measured through these three characteristics. One is influence. How many followers do they have? Second is resonance. How often is their content shared by people? So if you write a blog, if you post a good clinical case on social media, how many people view it and actually share it with more people? And how relevant is the content that they post? I think these are the three key matrices that can be used to measure the impact of digital opinion leadership. And naturally, we see that now we are in a transition phase where a lot of the traditional key opinion leaders are now trying to become digital opinion leaders. There is one survey that has revealed that 20% of the traditional key opinion leaders have now transformed to some level of digital opinion leadership, but they are in a very steady phase of actually becoming full-fledged digital opinion leaders. So you will see that there will be a mix of types over there. One would be a traditional KOL with some social media presence. So, or a non-traditional KOL influencer who operates both via social media, a health blog, or perhaps even an advocacy group, which includes tweets with trending news. So this is typically what we see in terms of the emergence of digital opinion leadership. There is also a lot of data to show that there is a differential preference of using Facebook versus other social network, be it website, YouTube, television, blogging, and traditional newspaper and magazine and events or even radio. And you can see by age group, the preference actually differs between age groups. But what clearly comes out is that Facebook and other social network like LinkedIn, etc., continue to be the top two, and it is common across the entire age group that we see here. So therefore, this clearly tells us that people are following. Now, does just a textual post is more impactful, or is a video post more impactful? And there is no doubt, there is a lot of data coming in from YouTube, and you can actually see it on the slide here, that 7 out of 10 YouTube subscribers say that YouTube creators change and shape culture. And that is same with doctors as well. And 6 out of 10 YouTube subscribers would follow and advise on what to buy or what to subscribe to in terms of content from their favorite creator. So they subscribe to their channels as well. So therefore, audio visual or video based content is now seen to be the most engaging. So Twitter followed by blogging, and in blogging, vlogging, as I mentioned, which is video blogging followed by text content based blogging, are considered to be the most. Now, therefore, having defined who a digital opinion leader is and what are the characteristics of a digital opinion leader and how do we measure the impact of a digital opinion leader, it's important also to know when should we use a digital opinion leader to get the most impact in terms of business. And I would also show you an interesting slide to say that can digital opinion leadership be measured in terms of its impact? Can it be converted into sales? And the answer is yes. There is a way to objectively measure the impact of digital opinion leadership in terms of pharma sales, and I'll show you that. So as you can clearly see here, so the innovation begins here. The first set of people who use it will be the early adopters, followed by the next set, which will be the first set of early majority followers, then the late majority, and finally the laggards. So as traditional wisdom goes, it holds good that even with digital opinion leaders, using them in the chasm phase or in the early adoption phase is where they can actually share a lot of their first-hand experience of using a product, which will have a significant positive rub-off on the early majority, which would kind of use. Now, while we are talking on the topic of digital opinion leadership, I also would like to introduce this very interesting concept which I read in one of the blogs about patient opinion leaders. And this makes it even more relevant for pharma companies, especially those companies that are working on novel products, rare diseases, etc. And especially those who are launching new to the world products, with newer mechanisms of action and action, etc. Because you don't have a lot of clinical data existing prior to the initial use of the products in the markets. So therefore, patient opinion leaders are those who are basically going to write about their initial patient experiences of having used a new targeted therapy. And they would post about their first few patients' experience of using a new product on digital media. It helps the universe of patients for whom a new treatment is developed feel spoken for, and is both educational and empowering for them. Since patient opinion leaders are seen as experts in the management of a specific health condition, and this specifically helps in rare diseases, hemophilia, some types of cancers, immunology related conditions. So a lot of these, I think, conditions, certain dermatology related long-term chronic conditions, certainly have a great relevance in having patient opinion leaders. There is a lot of empathy that is shown in the content that these doctors write, but POL is what eventually emerges into a KOL and a DOL. And this is more so, I think this is a great thing to be leveraged by every pharma company that is launching unique, novel products, because the first few patients that get to kind of experience the clinical benefit of a new product, it is important for doctors to write and share those experiences online. And that's going to create a huge following actually. And now coming to, therefore, having defined what a digital opinion leadership is, how do you measure the impact of a digital opinion leader? How would you select a digital opinion leader? Now, what is in it for pharma marketeers? It is clearly established that pharma marketeers now adopt a strategy called social listening. And social listening by pharma marketeers has a great impact in improving content marketing strategy. So it helps pharma marketeers to actually listen to the noise that's generated by brand and its consumers, monitor competitors very strongly, because competitors do kind of follow different companies and they do post content of their own. It gathers a lot of insights. Insights is about brand preference, what makes brand more trusted, and what gives a certain brand a higher share and acceptance vis-a-vis others. So insights is something that pharma marketeers gain. It helps them sharpen the content strategy and hence lead to creative publishing, testing, and learning. And this is what I want to, this is how they can therefore make big brands. So this is where you can actually see, once the key opinion leader or the digital opinion leader is chosen, then the way to communicate with the audience would be through a combination of both science and content. And in terms of science, here I wish to bring in the fantastic role that medical science liaisons actually play in being able to both physically and digitally disseminate information to the audience. And if all of this is actually kind of recorded in digital domain, it actually creates a great wealth of information over a period of time. So last but not the least, there is a fantastic publication that has been published in the International Journal of Internet Marketing and Advertising about 2 years ago. So is there a way to actually measure sales impact of opinion leaders? And that is where I was very interested to see this word called EWOM. What EWOM stands for is word of mouth, or electronic word of mouth. And electronic word of mouth is actually a way of measuring the impact of a digital opinion leader. There are three things that goes into measuring it. So the product effect, the knowledge effect that is gained, and the proper timing at which that particular knowledge has to be given. All three have got an impact on sales. And I think it is time that pharma marketeers or any healthcare marketeer is now able to objectively measure the impact of pharma marketing campaigns using some of these digital channels and measure the sales impact of it incrementally as well. So that is certainly doable. And also this kind of data does help in significant social intelligence and competitive intelligence as well. And that is the data insight that I was kind of referring to. And this is a traditional slide. As we know, doctors have always engaged in research and drug discovery, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 clinical trials, and post-approval, the advocacy cadence, or the advocacy creation and presentation of clinical data at conferences, publications. All this was the traditional way of marketing. Now, all of this can actually happen digitally as well. And that's the new way of digitally engaging leaders in drug development. I would conclude this presentation by actually showing this slide, which talks about, therefore, a summary of top 10 ways that pharma can engage healthcare professionals as digital opinion leaders. So the first one is be where your digital opinion leaders are by finding out which congresses they're going to, what is their key area of interest, and we need to get there. So that can help us to focus our outreach to them at the right place. Second, if we decide to send our field reps to engage with the digital opinion leaders, so we will be able to, by gathering data about the doctor's interest, we can actually have our reps give personalized insights to each of the digital opinion leaders. It is basically like customization of messaging to doctors and telling them information that they like, and running a training course specifically for digital opinion leaders to educate them in an area that they may be expressing a lack of certainty about. So telemedicine is one such area, right? So where doctors are wanting to get themselves trained in getting better to offer patient consultation using telemedicine or teleconsultation platforms. So that is one area. And using some of the rare drugs, using some of the novel drugs, new routes of administrations, etc. All of that would be great trainings as well. I was actually a party to one very interesting talk yesterday about insurance in health, and specifically cancer insurance. And in that, there were some very top oncologists of our country who were talking about, and they in fact expressed the need that they wanted to get themselves more educated about health insurance, because the knowledge about health insurance is not only lacking amongst patients in our country, even doctors themselves are not very sure what is in the fine print, what is covered under a health insurance policy, what is not covered in a health insurance policy. I think getting into areas like these, which are of great relevance to the doctor, who in turn can educate their patients to offer better clinical outcome. So those are things that doctors will value more from companies, from pharma companies and medical companies. And next is provide educational resources in published, every doctor would like to be published, by the way. So provide educational resources published in their preferred format, which doctors would be able to easily digest and repurpose. And some of our healthcare opinion, digital opinion leaders may turn out to be roles that we traditionally do not engage with. So which basically means that typically the ones whom we thought were HODs need not be a digital leader. By the way, I actually wanted to mention, so there is mention of one Dr. Fo. He's from Hong Kong. And he started off way back in 2004 with a website, okay? And this website basically was a site where he used to post information which were useful to patients. So what to do, what not to do in different types of medical conditions. And in a matter of no time, he had almost 30,000 followers, people who were reading his content and reading his blog, which was posted on his sites as well. And later on, he gathered almost 30 million followers. And now he primarily is, he kind of presents his papers and his work only in digital conferences. And as we know now, medical conferences are no longer happening, and therefore people presenting in digital conferences is extremely critical. And the credibility of such people will be known by the number of followers they have and how many people follow the blogs they write. And it's also a great opportunity for companies to actually help doctors in interpreting what is the right information and what is not the right information, especially about new products, new indications, etc. And it also, we can help or assist doctors with developing new social media. A lot of doctors do not know how to actually gain followers on Facebook, how to gain followers on Twitter. And content is king. That is what I say. That's the reason I started with data. So data, the content should be compelling and interesting enough for someone to actually gain a lot of popularity as a digital opinion leader. And that's where companies can actually help, and actually help doctors write content in a compelling manner and in an interesting manner. And finally, it helps develop our relationship with digital opinion leaders who will be a new generation of digital advocates. And that's typically how we see. And I've put the reference here. Anyone that's interested can actually go through the reference for more information. So that is what I actually had, in terms of sharing the information about digital opinion leadership. So I would like to stop here, and Dr. Swati, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Karthik, for a presentation which would surely open the eyes of our marketeers who are listening to this session and who will be listening to this session through Facebook Live sessions. And your point about educating these key opinion leaders, or rather a new generation of key opinion leaders who will be very digitally active, and how pharma companies could be helping them in becoming a digital opinion leader. That is very interesting, and I think that would be the future as we see it today. We have few questions, Dr. Karthik, in this session, and we have few luminaries of pharma also joining us. So we have Vivek sir joining us, we have Mr. Pavan joining us, we have Mr. Pankaj Srivastava joining us, Dr. VK is
Yes.
also there. So I welcome all the luminaries in pharma, the mentors we have,
Good
and
evening to all of you.
we will be interacting with everyone, sir. And let us go through the questions. First of all, let us answer
Yeah,
the
sir.
yeah.
Yes.
Satish, please take over.
Yeah. Yes, Swati, you can take it ahead. Yeah.
Satish, please take over. Please read the
Okay.
questions to
Okay.
us.
Thank you so much, Swati. Yeah. Perfect. Perfect. So, sir, I'll take the first question, which is coming from Mr. Shankar Raj Purohit. The question is new launch and webinars in collaboration with celebrity or sportsmen has been increasing in pharma. Is it really helping beyond just getting views?
I would say the relevance and the context is important. I can always tell you that one of the very first such campaigns, which I also personally remember, is that of a company which used to market glucometers, where they used a cricket celebrity from Pakistan, as all of us know, in their campaigns. And if it is about a celebrity who is able to come and share something about their own personal experience of having used a product, be it a medical device, be it a pharma product, I think there is nothing wrong in it, because it is more about sharing what did they experience with that, and how did they benefit, and what positive impact did it have in terms of clinical outcome of having used that product. So that becomes more like a patient's perspective, while the patient may be a celebrity himself or herself. But yes, that brings in confidence amongst people who would like to start using that product, and who might possibly, more and more people may gain the benefit out of it. But if the context and relevance to a particular disease state or a particular clinical outcome is missing, and if just a celebrity has been brought in more in terms of grabbing more, I would say, eyeballs, or grabbing, it's more of a marketing pull, there I see less relevance. That is going to be my take on this.
Right. Okay. So Mahinder Bhish sir is saying, very nicely explained, encouraging to see 63% share of Facebook, which is equal to TV share in the age group of more than 35%. So this platform will be explored now onwards in a better manner, as the age 35 years and above people are more health conscious now.
I think everyone is health conscious. So as all of us know, I think this virus is teaching us a lot of things. One is humility. That is very important, So there is one very popular message all of us would have seen on WhatsApp doing the rounds. Who's that one leader who actually led to digital transformation in your company? And it gives three options. It says CEO, CTO, and it says SARS-CoV-2 or COVID-19. And I think COVID-19 kind of wins thumbs up. I think necessity is the mother of all invention. And I think digital transformation in healthcare has seen unprecedented growth due to the pandemic. It's I would say, one of the positive side effects of this pandemic. But having said that, yes, Facebook has always been there. It's been there for close to 1.5 decades now, almost. But yes, the way how Facebook has shaped up when it comes to healthcare content is very key. And I showed this triad in the first slide of my presentation. It had a patient, it had a doctor, and it had the industry there. Now, what makes a certain doctor more popular and more credible as a digital opinion leader is when that doctor is able to get into patient groups. In Facebook, if you see, there are specific patient groups for specific patient types. There is a hemophilia patient group. There is a type 1 diabetes patient group. There is a type 2 diabetes patient group. There are specific cancer, different types of cancers. A group specifically dedicated to cervical cancer, group dedicated to breast cancer, etc. And these are actually patient support groups. And patient support groups typically, in earlier days, and by the way, this is another important thing. A digital opinion leader is not just a doctor. That is very, very important for us to understand. Dietitians are becoming great digital opinion leaders by offering great advice on nutrition. Patient educators, especially in diabetes, endocrinology, oncology, immunology, nephrology, patient educators are becoming great digital opinion leaders because patients find it easy to access someone like this on a Zoom call or on a WhatsApp video call and actually get their doubts clarified. And access to right information, credible information, fair and balanced information is what makes one a very strong and reputed digital opinion leader. So digital opinion leader is not just a doctor. Any additional person that is able to positively impact clinical outcome, which is it could be a pharmacist, it could be a disease-based educator, a patient educator, it could be a dietitian, a nutritionist, it could be a physiotherapist, for all you know. I think all of these are credible. But when you look at global ranking, Twitter comes number 1. Blogging, video blogging as we see, comes number 2, which is primarily driven through YouTube. And then Facebook, followed by LinkedIn, comes as 3 and 4. So that's the ranking in terms of the strength of influence that social media has in healthcare.
Okay, right, sir. So next question is from Mr. Pawan Kulkarni. Question is like this. In my survey I did, each doctor is using 5 to 6 different platforms of telemedicine. What attributes of telemedicine you think will win the race? Though still WhatsApp is the most commonly used due to easy user ergonomics.
Correct. So I think it is important for us to define what are the critical success metrics factors for a good telemedicine platform or a teleconsultation platform. So a teleconsultation platform is not just a video or an audiovisual medium which enables a doctor and a patient to see face-to-face like this, right? So a teleconsultation platform is a combination of an EMR. EMR is electronic medical record as we call it. A PHR. PHR is a personal health record of a patient, which the patient has access to. And most importantly, insight. What many telemedicine platforms are missing today is the insight part of it, and to a great extent, the data repository part of it. So therefore, what will differentiate a good teleconsultation platform, a well-thought strategic teleconsultation platform from another, is basically data. So if the teleconsultation platform can make sure that every patient ID that logs in to seek a consultation has a very properly maintained EMR that's preloaded into the system, it gives the opportunity for the doctor to study the patient's case even before the doctor actually visually sees the patient on the other side. So it is very difficult for doctors to actually see a patient who is sitting opposite them and they don't know anything about that patient. So it would actually be a great help if the doctor has access to the patient's medical records even before a video-based consultation happens. So the doctor is able to ask pertinent leading questions or prompting questions to the patient and is able to make a more data-backed informed clinical decision. So EMR, PHR combined into a telemedicine or a teleconsultation platform is always preferred, and it's a great differentiator. And many of these PHRs or EMRs are now AI enabled. So what I mean by that is when you have sequential data of a specific patient available on these platforms, they are able to throw up the specific insights. So it would throw insights, for example, let's talk about a diabetes patient. If you have about 10 or 12 blood sugar recordings or HbA1c recordings available in the EMR, it will actually throw insights as to across, if you look at a 12-month trend or if you look at a 24-month trend, in what has been the glycemic variability in this patient. Now, glycemic variability is a very, very critical insight for an endocrinologist or a diabetologist because it helps that particular doctor to make an assessment of the microvascular risk or the macrovascular risk that the patient may be running into, right? So therefore, insights backed by data which comes in EMR and PHR is what differentiates a good, well-thought teleconsultation platform from the other. And of course, all platforms do have an integrated payment gateway that ensures that the patient is able to pay for the consultation and the doctor gets paid for the consultations as well.
Yeah, rightly said. And sir, also in WhatsApp, they are bringing the payment gateway. Facebook also same is happening. So future is that seems to be that only.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right, right.
Absolutely. But again, it doesn't matter whether it's a Practo or Librate and whether tomorrow it's a WhatsApp teleconsultation or a Facebook teleconsultation. As long as data is key, everyone will do a good job of it. Because at the end of the day, clinical outcome is always data based.
Yeah. So Mr. Chandramouli is asking how to touch base the remote areas where still there is limited access to healthcare, where the pharma companies need to work upon.
Correct. So I think, when we look at remote areas today, all remote areas today in the country have at least a 2G connection, and BSNL has been there. And now with Jio coming in, by the way, Jio connections are now much better than BSNL in many of the locations, by the way. So therefore, teleconsultation need not always be video based like this. A teleconsultation would just be a telephonic call also, right? So now what is happening is there are multiple teleconsultation networks and e-health companies who have actually introduced this service, which are accessible even in the remotest villages of the country. Where, for example, I can talk about one of the earliest initiatives that started way back in March was an initiative called Step One. And Step One was initiated first by the government of Karnataka, government of Maharashtra and Haryana. And later on, multiple other states picked up. It's a free, toll-free number which patients can call. It was advertised significantly by the state governments in the local language across all regional language newspapers, radio channels, and television channels in the local language channels as well. And it was significantly popular, and they are doing almost close to around 20 to 25,000 calls in a day today, the Step One initiative. The second initiative which came up recently is an initiative called Swasth Initiative. And Swasth Initiative is also a free service initiative for people in the rural areas. And they are actually doing great service in being able to offer free teleconsultation service from family physician and MD physician doctors. And they're able to clearly differentiate COVID versus non-COVID cases. And the triaging is happening there. And immediately anyone detected to be, or rather perceived to be having COVID is immediately sent out to the Aptamitra helpline. And then immediately the municipal corporation is taking over from there, and the patient is receiving service within 6 to 24 hours, depending on the distance from the nearest tertiary care town. So that way, there are quite a few digital initiatives which has happened as a combination of partnership between multiple e-health players, which are basically startup companies in health, and Niti Aayog, as well as the National Digital Health Mission, as we see right now. And that's a very good trend. So we will see more of this in the coming days. And most importantly, these are free. So poor patients in remote areas don't have to pay anything for these services. It's completely free of cost.
Yeah, right, sir. The next question is from Mr. Venkata. Venkat is asking where and how to identify digital influence leaders.
Correct. So as we saw in one of the slides, I think the simplest metrics are how many followers does the doctor have in digital media. So let's look at how many followers the doctor has on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and does the doctor write blogs? And by the way, writing a blog is just like writing an article, penning down an article. Okay. And I think, I would always say that there is nothing that replaces experience. A doctor with 30 to 40 years of clinical experience certainly is in a much better position to write engaging content than possibly someone with a 5, 10, 15 year experience, but is more digitally savvy, right? Nothing would replace experience. But the only thing is a doctor who has those 35, 40 years experience may not be digitally savvy. They may not know how to write a blog. And I think that is typically where healthcare companies can come in as partners. And that's typically what doctors would actually always encourage and would always see a lot of value in terms of consultative and a partnered approach, and not just a product promotion based approach. So that's the place where medical science liaison can play a great role. Medical advisors can play a great role. Therapy area specialists can play a great role. And that relationship that we can build through these kind of non-promotional, but image building and credibility building initiative is immense. And that's a long-term relationship. But having said that, yes, some simple short answer to the question, number of followers, they have, the quality of content they share. Now, how can you measure quality of content? The number of people that share a content is the measure of quality of content. If you share good content, people don't mind sharing it. Okay. And these are some of the ways of actually determining it. And at the same time, through social media, we can now draw digital spheres of influence or communities of practice, as we call it as. So therefore, how many followers are doctors themselves? So if you have a particular doctor who has a significant chunk of followers who are doctors themselves, that gives you a sense of saying that this is a true digital opinion leader respected by medical fraternity and also by the patient fraternity. So that becomes a true combination of a digital opinion leader and a patient opinion leader, the POL that we discussed. And POL very, very relevant in rare diseases, POL very relevant especially for new launches, and new product launches, etc.
Yeah. Sir,
I'll just take a minute because I received a question from Dr. Rahul Rathore. So let me put it first. Are patients allowed to share their experience on any specific therapy outcomes in public or social media influenced by pharma company initiatives, not at individual level? In pharma company initiated initiatives, how to control recommendations, advertisement of products under the Magic Remedies Act, how to draw the fine line?
Sure. As all of us know, the fine line is just about what you wish to market and how you wish to market it, right? So the what you wish to market, as long as the primary intent is to advance medicine or advance science. When I say advanced medicine, advanced science, if it is about a clinical case that has been solved by a new therapy that has become available, and if there is a very proper history and clinical findings that are actually kind of presented as a part of the case study, and if it is brought in a perspective as to how generally majority of doctors would have approached that particular clinical case, it is more like, gradual escalation metrics, as we say. We start with a known therapy or an established therapy, and when that therapy fails to provide the required clinical outcome or the cure, then they bring in a newer therapy, either as an add-on or they discontinue the old therapy and bring this as a complete new monotherapy. So those, I think, experiences are very critical and crucial. And once it is presented either as a case study or a proposed, you can say, workflow to management, or more like a draft guideline to management in a stepwise format, and without revealing the brand, without making any mention which is promotional in nature, I think that will bring in a lot of credibility. And of course, care will be taken that patient privacy is utmost importance. So no patient data points are revealed, no hospital data points are revealed. It is kept very generic in nature and very educational in nature, where more and more people can actually relate to a similar patient they may have seen in the past or they may possibly see in the coming future. And they will clearly know that, okay, if this approach has worked, there is a precedence, and therefore I can also follow that approach and possibly benefit more patients.
Thank you, Karthik. I hope the answer is clear, and we will also open up the forum at the end. So anyone who wants to discuss on specific points can discuss directly with Dr. Karthik.
Yeah. So, Doctor, so next question is from Mr. Pankaj Srivastav. So, sir is asking, dear doc, excellent presentation. How can e-pharmacies forge or make a partnership with medical profession and patients?
Absolutely. Think about it. We were just discussing about what differentiates a good teleconsultation platform from a normal or a regular teleconsultation platform. As we know, what is the end result of a teleconsultation? So there is a patient, the patient spoke to a doctor over a video call or a telephonic call. The doctor looked at data, reports, and then made a clinical diagnosis, and the doctor eventually prescribed something. Now that prescription typically may have repeat or follow-up investigations, like lab investigations on it. And that prescription may also have some medicines written on it. So the doctor may have either up-titrated the medicine, down-titrated the medicine, there could be an add-on medicine, etc. Now, if we can think of integrating this teleconsultation platform with an online pharmacy, and this is the point where I bring in that point of API. So I mentioned something called API, which is a different API other than the active pharma ingredient that we know. API is the technology-based API where one app talks to another app and data flows from one app to the other or one technology platform to another. So if you can integrate an e-pharmacy app to a teleconsultation platform, an e-lab platform to a teleconsultation platform, what ends up happening is at the end of the consultation, once the e-prescription is generated, the medicine written on the prescription, the investigation written on the prescription can easily flow into the e-pharmacy partners app and the e-lab partners app, and they can fulfill that prescription. So the pharmacist or the the phlebotomist can actually call the patient, fix up an appointment, confirm the prescription, and then deliver those services at the home of a patient. So that becomes a cohesive e-health ecosystem of telemedicine, teleconsultation, where the fulfillment aspect of medicine and the fulfillment aspect of lab repeat investigations are taken care together on one technology platform. And by the way, it's already a reality. There are companies which are already doing a combination of teleconsultation, lab, and e-pharmacy together. I can at least talk about 3 or 4 such companies which are already operational.
Yes. Okay. Sir, Mr. Jagan Bedi is saying doctors are now irritated with digital activity. In such a case, how can we interact with doctors digitally?
Correct. The question we need to ask ourselves is, why are doctors irritated, right? So if the interaction that we are having is like, again, doing a video call, taking our visual aid and start detailing, I think doctors are not interested anymore, right? So doctors, it is important to gain the doctor's interest. And how do we gain it? We can only gain a doctor's interest by actually getting to know what interests him, right? So as I mentioned to you, I may not have all the answers, because what interests a doctor, we will only know when we do a proper KYC. I think a proper know your customer, a proper understanding of the customer's profile is very critical. I can share with you some of the things we used to do in the past when we used to do, before going and meeting a doctor. Personally, I was always of the opinion that I used to go check the LinkedIn profile of the doctor. Now, why is it important to check the LinkedIn profile of a doctor? So we get to know who are the other doctors in the doctor's network. That's one. Second, we get to know which medical college the doctor studied. Number 3, we get to know whether the doctor is published in a peer-reviewed journal, or even if he has published some case study. Number 4, we get to know whether he has actually presented in certain conferences, because the moment a doctor goes to the conference, he'll put up his photograph presenting there on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn for sure. And we get to see many good doctors doing it, by the way. Number 5, we get to know which are all the various institutions the doctor has actually worked in, if he's a consultant going into multiple institutions. And somewhere you get a connect. And it is more like a conversation starter. So when you go to a doctor and say, hey, doctor, you are from this particular college, and that the teacher who taught there was also my visiting professor in my medical college there. It is a great conversation starter when you are able to bring relevance to a previous experience of the doctor. Next, the doctor could have been, you never know, doctor could have done a great phase 3 clinical trial. He might be on an expert input forum, and he might have actually led to a certain discovery of a new product. So if you have that background information of the doctor, it gives you the right, kind of information of a good conversation starter or a good thing. You get to know what are the areas of interest of this doctor. Now, when we know that, that is when, if we are able to customize our communication to what the doctor expects us to talk to him, that is when the doctor will never refuse a call to us. He will never refuse time to us. But if we go in a traditional pharma marketing way, that yes, my marketing manager has told me, visit 1, I will detail this brand, visit 2, I will detail second brand, visit 3, I'll detail third brand. I think those days are gone. Doctors are not interested, my friends. So we should make it personalized communication. We are in the era of personalized medicine. As all of you know, there are leading companies globally who are actually doing a lot of work on genetics. They are getting into genomic typing of patients, and certain therapies in certain super specialized areas in endocrinology, immunology, nephrology, oncology will now be more customized depending on the patient's genetic profile. So we are actually getting into the era of customized medicine. When technology in pharma has moved into customized medicine, I think it is very important and pertinent that we get into personalized communication to the doctor. And that can only happen when you know your doctor. So that's my answer, that, we should refrain from traditional way of pharma marketing. Customized communication, after having known the likes and dislikes and the taste of the doctor, is what will build a stronger relationship.
Okay, yeah. The next question, sir, is from Mr. Pawan Kulkarni again. So he's saying, Doctor, do you think Amazon will come with healthcare consulting? Though that's a white space area for them, what are other white space opportunities for pharma with telemedicine?
Sure. So I can give you, I think the information all of you already know in public domain is that Amazon has launched e-pharmacy in Bangalore, and they will be expanding significantly in the next 4 to 6 weeks. You might see them starting their e-pharmacy operations in at least another top 6 to 8 cities in the country. And Amazon has developed strong partnerships with MedPlus. And so that way, the area of e-pharmacy is going to grow significantly. You also know that Reliance has acquired NetMeds.
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Yeah.
I request you, please, we will take the questions at the end of the sessions directly. Let the questions from the chat sections finish, and then we will open the forum, sir. So please be patient.
Yeah. So therefore, yes, all of these companies, by the way, start off as an e-pharmacy. And what is going to be the general progression of such companies is that when you start off as an e-pharmacy, most e-pharmacies in the country, as we know, close to about 70 to 75% of customers of e-pharmacies are NCD customers, non-communicable disease customers. And if you dive a little deep into understanding data there, so this 70-75% is primarily diabetic patients, hypertensive, dyslipidemic patients, patients with gastroenterology, dermatology related diseases. Mostly chronic diseases is where disease is the pattern that you see of patients going into an e-pharmacy and buying medicine. Now, in such patients, so when you look at insights as to what are the therapeutic areas which are relevant to such patients, after gaining some of the data points like this, Amazon, like company, can very easily get into teleconsultation, because teleconsultation is only an enabling business. It will further augment their pharmacy business, because the more and more you do teleconsultation, you are generating more and more e-prescriptions. And the more the e-prescription you generate, those e-prescriptions can be fulfilled by the e-pharmacy. So that way, it is a beneficial business for somebody like an Amazon to actually get into. I'm sure Amazon would have already thought about it, and they have all the technology know-how and all the data insights to be able to get into telemedicine.
Yeah, right, sir. And just to add into that, sir, this integration of API makes it very easy for two platforms to join hand, and the very next day they can launch it pan-India. So this is a possibility, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And by the way, everything need not have to be developed in-house. There is today, I think now is the time. Collaborations are happening very quickly. Partnerships that used to take several months are now forged within weeks. And that is one of the other positive outcomes of the pandemic. So it has brought companies together, and companies have realized that instead of competing with one another, if we can collaborate and work together, it will actually be a win-win for everyone. And that's exactly the way how Swasti app was launched, which I mentioned just a little while ago. That's exactly the way how Step One was launched. And I was involved in launching of both the initiatives in my previous organization. So that way, this was a collaborative effort of all competing companies. People stopped competing with one another and they started collaborating. So Amazon can, in fact, very well collaborate with established, companies who already have a teleconsultation service, a lab service, etc., and just augment their service with that. So collaboration is the key there.
Yes. Mr. Kaushik Chakrabarti is asking, sir, as you have mentioned just now about the telemedicine, but how pharma companies can involve themselves in between doctor and patient directly during treatment?
Okay, so I think the way, number one, I think very important to realize that no pharma company or pharma company employee should have any direct interaction with a patient. Okay, that is very, very important. It is non-compliant. I think all of us know the pharma code of ethics and the pharma, guidelines there. But that being said, can pharma companies play a very critical role in enabling a meaningful interaction between doctor and patient over a teleconsultation platform? The answer is absolutely yes. And that's completely through patient education platforms. As I mentioned to you, any telemedicine platform is only getting better when they have data and insights coming from that data. So therefore, anything related to disease therapy area based workflows, or the workflow of how to manage a particular disease or a clinical condition. And we also used to have something called a problem solution database. Problem solution database, you can call it very simple as an FAQ, right, about a disease. So what are the do's and don'ts for a patient when he has a certain disease? What are the things he's allowed to do? What are the things he's not allowed to do, and why? So if that knowledge database is something that pharma companies can create, it actually brings in a lot of insight and data-driven, approach to clinical decision-making to the doctor. Second important thing, we are seeing the emergence of, usage of Google by patients before they meet doctors. And I've seen, again, a lot of WhatsApp messages going where doctors have put in boards that, if you're actually looking at Google and coming to meet me, it is not right. So several messages I've seen like that. But I think very important, Google cannot replace a doctor's clinical experience. Very important. Google is not a doctor. But Google should be used well and wisely to get generic information. But Google is not a doctor. Very important for us to know that and message the same message to everyone. Having said that, so yes, pharma companies can play a role in providing authentic information about disease areas, authentic information about all various products which are beneficial, not just focusing on their own product, but the complete therapy mapping and the complete therapy shaping. And also pharma companies can actually play a role in shaping guidelines. Now, shaping guidelines typically happens when you launch new products, new therapies with new indications, where you don't have a precedence of having used that particular product in that particular condition. So therefore, if companies can actually work with medical practitioners, with societies, so there are naturally endocrinology societies, physician societies, oncology, rheumatology societies. If they can work with societies of doctors and develop disease treatment guidelines, which are based on practical medicine. What I mean by practical medicine is you just can't simply download a guideline from the web and then start practicing that way, right? Every patient's body does not respond that way. So if the initial few cases, if the doctors can document those cases and guidelines can be made, that is, if that can be done in partnership with the pharma company and their MSL team and the medical affairs team, that will actually lead to a great relationship in bettering clinical outcome of patients. So pharma plays a role in data. Pharma plays a role in having a good EMR and a PHR maintained for patients. All of this is non-promotional in nature, and that can be a strong relationship forging mechanism between doctor and the patient using telemedicine.
Yeah, right, sir. So basic crux is it should be non-promotional.
It should be non-promotional. Yes. It should be fair and balanced. It should not be the intent. The most important critical part here is the intent should not be to promote their product. The moment a doctor or a patient realizes that, we lose credibility. Very, very important to remember that. But if the intent is to enhance clinical outcome, right? Even without promoting your brand, the doctor will write it and the patient will buy it.
Exactly, right. This is the last question in the chat box. The question is coming from Mr. Shankar Rajpurohit.
We have another question.
So I will take that.
Please.
So Mr. Shankar Rajpurohit is saying, how do new marketers encash personalizing interactions as average acquisition cost is increasing?
Can you please repeat that question? How do new marketers?
Yeah, how do new marketers encash this personalizing interactions? So as average acquisition cost is increasing. So I think he's saying like if you invest more on personalizing these interaction or focusing one-to-one type of thing, then you have to invest more for these activities.
Sure. So what were the investments that generally companies used to make, right? If we look at general ways of investments, the doctors, they used to give either journal subscriptions They used to sometimes offer conferences, right? Doctors used to attend CMEs, meetings, etc. Yes, I think all of those traditional ways of engagement definitely are good, but as long as they are meaningful enough and they're able to enhance the clinical knowledge of doctors and they're able to put it back in their practice, absolutely yes. But that being said, I think now in what digital brings in is digital significantly cuts down the cost of interaction with the doctor. It significantly brings better efficiency in terms of managing the time that we get with the doctor. Now that also redefines what doctor engagement would be, right? Now, doctor engagement can be that a doctor would like to be published. Yeah, so we will only know when we talk to the doctor and possibly ask that particular question to the doctor that, sir, would you like to be a part of a phase 4 program? So we'd like to run a phase 4 program, gather insights in terms of a phase 4 marketed clinical trial, and then we'd like to be a part of that study group. Many doctors would like to do that. Second, as I mentioned to you, the doctor of a little advanced age, maybe 55-year-old plus doctors, have significant clinical experience, 30, 35 years plus experience, but they may not be very digitally savvy. But in terms of the types of complex clinical cases they would have solved and patients they would have treated, they might have had a wealth of clinical information with them, but it remains with them, but it needs to be shared with the external world. So if pharma companies, with help from their medical affairs team, their medical science liaison team, or the therapy area lead team, etc., if pharma companies can be that conduit of actually helping the doctor pen down their experiences, pen down those rare cases, clinical cases, what is the right stepwise approach to solving those kind of patient clinical cases and how they could succeed in saving that life. And if pharma companies becomes that conduit of creating the first Facebook profile, the first blog, the first LinkedIn profile, and then posting it, and hence creating that traditional opinion leader as a first step towards making them sharing their experiences in a digital opinion leader format, those relationships will be much, much stronger. So publications, subscriptions to online journals which enhance medical knowledge, digitally enabling the doctor, most importantly, offering training on telemedicine. I have seen many doctors. I met a doctor who was 70 years old about a month ago. So physically went and met him. And I asked him that, sir, what is that one thing which is actually worrying you? He said that earlier I used to see 20, 25 patients in a day. Now I'm only seeing 2 patients. Patients are trying to call me at odd hours. I'm actually finding it very difficult to offer them a proper OPD consultation. So that doctor could not even use a computer well. So what they need is someone to handhold them. So if we can provide those kind of things, then there was one more thing, by the way, engagement. Yesterday, I was in another webinar about insurance, for cancer patients. Now, what the leading oncologists of our country said is how I wish I had some company supporting me in actually having a patient advisor, a financial advisor for my cancer patients sitting in my clinic. And by the way, it doesn't have to be physical. Now you can have a patient financial advisor doing it digitally. Patients are more than happy to talk. What patients and doctors want to know is what kind of medical insurance to take and why, and how, to my particular clinical condition, which insurance suits the most. What is in my coverage, what is not covered under my insurance, what is that fine print. So people need this information. So who will give that information? Doctors themselves don't know about insurance. So doctors also are asking for help. These are things that pharma companies can do, right? Instead of the routine way of going and, investing on doctors. So I think, how do we get to know all this? We get to know all this only when we probe and get some insights as to what is the pain point of this doctor? What is worrying this doctor? We have to make that effort to find out. And that's when customized communication and customized engagement as to whatever the doctor needs is what we can give. So that is where I think the right alignment happens.
Exactly. Very well explained, sir. Vivek Hattangadi sir is asking, what can be the role of patient advocacy groups?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, sir. And Dr. Vivek, a pleasure to meet you after so many years. Really great to get this question from you. I think the role of patient advocacy groups can actually work 2 ways. And as I was mentioning, patient opinion leadership becomes extremely relevant and critical for newer products with newer mechanisms of action. It also becomes very relevant for rare diseases, especially where patient support is critical, like hemophilia, like type 1 diabetes, etc., right? And certain neurology related conditions, mental health related conditions, etc. So that way, I think what patient support certainly can do is patient support, again, I come back to the part of data. So patient support can ensure that it is able to keep data around how the for how many times has the patient been compliant to therapy, has there been a skip dose, etc., and how compliant has the patient been in terms of getting their repeat investigations done, their repeat doctor consultations done, especially in chronic conditions, etc., and what impact is it having on the eventual clinical outcome. So everything will eventually link back to data that is accumulated over a period of time. Second is naturally not, as all of us know, not every patient responds to a same dose of a therapy in the same way. So every person's, so as we call the pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics are different in different people. So therefore, what we see is that this patient support groups can also lead to creation of patient support, not just offered by a patient educator or a patient support specialist, but even amongst patients who have been able to actually do certain things better in terms of better compliance and taking more informed decisions, they can act as positive influences on other patients who are not able to get the right disease control. So therefore, it works in two ways. One is peer influence, two is data-driven influence, and I think the heart of everything is data. So that's the way I look at a digital ecosystem of patient support.
Okay, right, sir. Sir, we had a few people also joining from the Facebook Live. So there are two questions there also. So I'll ask those questions. Sure. Yeah. So the first question is from Mr. Amit Kumar Mane. Question is, what are the opportunities in online pharmacy in India right now?
Sure. When we say opportunities in terms of business opportunities or job opportunities?
That he has not mentioned, sir.
Sure. So let me talk about both, right? In terms of business opportunity, I think it's a booming industry for sure. As we speak, online pharmacies in India are about 2% of the total Indian pharma market, but fast growing. What the pandemic has led to is, it has, as I told you, the demand for getting or procuring medicines through online pharmacies has jumped from anywhere between 3 to 5 times for different players. As we see, the industry is undergoing consolidation. So Reliance has acquired one of the companies called NetMeds. MedLife and PharmEasy have merged. Amazon has gotten into e-pharmacy. 1mg is another leading e-pharmacy in the country. And outside of this, there are some very strong regional players like Sasta Sundar in West Bengal. They offer complete e-pharmacy, e-health services in Bengali and Assamese. There is another company called My Upchar, very, very strong in the Hindi-speaking hinterland of the country, very strong in UP, Uttarakhand, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Jharkhand, etc. They offer all their services in Hindi. So that way, there are some very strong regional players and very strong national players, but the mantra that's going on right now is consolidation. This industry is going to grow. The projected, top line that we see for most of these companies, all of these top companies, I would say put together is about $2.5 billion overall. But yes, that is set to grow significantly. But having said that, what we see is that this creates a huge opportunity for people with a pharma background to also consider making career or to have job opportunities in e-health or e-pharmacies as well. So they need a lot of pharmacists, because pharmacists talk to patients, reconfirm prescriptions before the prescription get dispensed. So there are opportunities there. People with a pharma sales background will also be required in terms of the e-pharmacy marketing. See, the heart of an e-pharmacy is data. And what is the data we are talking about? It is the catalog. So the first thing that we get to see on an e-pharmacy app or a website is the product or the medicine being listed there. So the way how you represent a product, how you represent the brand name, the composition, the strengths, the indications, contraindications, everything, the content is what actually drives traffic online. So therefore, people with a pharmacy background have a great deal of work to do in terms of proper cataloging, proper content creation, and hence driving the right SEO or the search engine optimization for e-pharma companies. So there are multitude of roles that pharmacy graduates, people from pharma sales background can think of in the e-health sector or the e-pharmacy sector.
Yes. The next one is from Facebook Live only, sir. So question is from Mr. Bhaskar Chakravarti. He's saying, hello, Dr. Karthik. First of all, congrats for joining Roche. Then he says, I wanted to know about the risks involved with e-worm, e-word of mouth from both HCP and patients. Would it need reputation management?
E-word of mouth. So e-word of mouth, yes, I think e-word of mouth is not exactly online reputation management. Online reputation management and offline reputation management, I think, follows similar tenets, and we know what they are. The content has to be trustworthy, it has to be unbiased, it has to be non-promotional, and it has to be backed with evidence and data. I think this is what makes content worthy, whether it's shared offline or whether it's shared online. But what e-word of mouth really means is what we call virality. You might have heard of something called as viral videos, right? There are certain videos which go viral. There are millions of views that it gains within a couple of hours or a couple of days. So e-word of mouth is like virality of content. Now, what makes a certain video viral is basically the content of the video and the relevance of the video to that particular environment or to that particular context. So therefore, what it basically means is how can the digital content, whether it's a blog or a vlog, which is a video blog, or a Facebook post or a LinkedIn post, how does it become viral? Because that content is so relevant to the disease in question. For example, think about the number of views somebody got when Remdesivir was launched in the current context. Think about the number of views a certain blog about the first COVID-19 vaccine will get, once it gets launched, right? And think about how many people are actually searching for what is going on in the phase 3 clinical trials of the top 2 or 3 vaccines, be it the AstraZeneca Oxford trial vaccine or the Pfizer and BioNTech vaccine or the Moderna vaccine. So the context is that we are in the middle of a pandemic, and hence the context drives a preference that yes, we are searching for this particular content. So the context and the relevance of the content is what leads to virality. More and more people will read, share with their contacts, and that is what leads to what we call e-word of mouth, which is electronic word of mouth, and more people talking about it and sharing that particular content.
Wonderfully
Yeah, right.
explained, Dr.
Dr.
Karthik, because
Karthik,
this happened, yes,
Hmm.
Satish? This
Please go
happened,
ahead.
I just wanted to add here, because we at Pharma State do keep a track of news related to pharma, and we shared at LinkedIn, we keep sharing at LinkedIn, Facebook, and other social media. And at LinkedIn, when this Remdesivir and Favipiravir news came, we shared the screenshots. And
Correct.
those news itself are shared and viewed, 50,000 times viewed. 700
Absolutely.
likes are there, so that is where we have to place our eyes on.
Absolutely.
Which news
Absolutely. I can share with you one of my personal experience also. So before we started working from home, late February, early March, we developed a lot of video-based content and text-based content about the pandemic before the lockdown began. And from the time we posted a certain video, within a matter of about 5 to 6 hours, we had more than 500,000 views. And that's the nature of. And again, what drives that kind of virality are what we call keywords. So the moment you upload any content online, you are required to put something called title. You're required to write something called the description, and then you're required to put something called keywords and hashtags. Now, keywords and hashtags are very, very key, and any digital marketeer would actually vouch for it, because keywords and hashtag are picked up, and that is how the optimization happens of the content. So anyone searching on a Google search column, if he puts that particular keyword, if you are able to pick up the most searched keyword and put it as a hashtag, your video will actually start ranking on the top.
Yeah,
and that's when more and more people would view.
Yes,
it will start trending. So that is what leads to virality, and virality is driven by keywords.
Exactly.
Yeah, right, sir. So I think there are no more questions in the chat and Facebook Live at this moment. So,
Facebook, we have a question, Satish,
so you can
from
ask
Mr.
Dr. Swati at this
Yeah,
moment.
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
From Mr. Arindam Majumdar. He is asking how key opinion leaders can make the audience more curious and create some kind of excitement through constant engagement. He is
Sure,
guessing, asking
absolutely.
how to implement what
Yeah,
you're saying.
yeah, absolutely. I think there are, two things come to my mind, top of mind. One is humor. So medicine need not be boring at all times. I have seen quite a few doctors who have a great sense of humor, and they actually share their sense of humor through patient cases. Okay, and I think that's a gift. That's indeed a gift that certain doctors have. Nothing would beat humor, and that becomes immediately engaging and brings people together. Uh, the second important thing, which kind of again, I was talking about context and relevance, right? The second important thing is to again look at how do we make sure that the patient is able to kind of understand it. See, it should be uh, any kind of content that you present. Again, as I told you, the content and context is very key. But at the same time, making it very palatable and relevant. And if you're talking to a patient, it's important that we understand who our audience are. If the audience is a patient, bringing that level of understanding down to what a patient can understand, and making it in a more lively way. I have seen a lot of schools are now running online, classes for kids. What I have seen is that using quiz as a medium, where there are many online platforms which run live quiz now. So if you are able to run a quiz kind of a thing where there's a question for you to answer, there's a response that is sought. We used to earlier in pharma pads, and now that used to be physical voting pad we used to use when we conduct workshops, but now that has been converted into a digital voting pad. You have digital platforms and apps which work as digital voting pads, where you ask a question, the audience can respond to it. You ask, so I think quiz, voting pads, and humor-based techniques have always worked, and I would say that they will continue to work. That is going to be amongst the most engaging.
Thank you, Karthik, so much. And now we shall open the forum for one-to-one interactions. So we have Dr. answering questions, or anyone who wants to have an interaction with Dr. Karthik can have. I would invite our speakers who are there with Pharma State to just.
Dr. Swati, may I
Yes,
have
yes.
one question?
Yes, Meher sir, why not?
Good evening, Mr. Karthik. It was a nice presentation,
Good
very
evening, sir.
simply elaborated, well understood. Now, looking at the situation, what you elaborated, that the share of 60% plus of TV is almost matched by Facebook. Am I right? And
Yes.
that too with the age group of more than 35. Where is the real challenge to strike the balance between family front and professional front? Because everything that starts accumulating at that particular age group and onwards, right?
Yes.
This is one situation. Now with the platforms are being explored and various kind of platforms are being utilized to communicate, what is your opinion about the future of pharmaceutical industry? One, in terms of shift from prescription of brands to generic. Number two, the shift from prescription to OTC. That is what I would like to have your views. I repeat, shifting of prescription to OTC, and number two, shifting of prescription brands to generic brands.
Sure. Thank you for that question, Mr. Mahendra. So, the way how I look at it is, I think every product has a role, and every product has a customer. Naturally, as we know broadly, if we were to divide healthcare service into public healthcare and private healthcare, naturally there are specific brands which work well in the private sector. There are specific generic brands which work well in the public sector. And we also see that there are, with all the Ayushman Bharat and now the the whole public health ecosystem shaping up in a new manner. So it will naturally create much more relevance and I would say a larger positioning for cost-effective generic brands wherever it is available. But that being said, I think what is important here is that whether it is an innovator brand or whether it is a generic brand, clinical evidence and data around clinical outcome with that particular brand will be very important. So the more and more doctors gain clinical confidence of having used a certain brand, that is certainly going to build a lot of brand trust. And that's the same irrespective of whether it's a novel brand or a generic brand. But that being said, what would drive the OTC trend? We are now seeing, if I were to look at this from the context of the lockdown and the pandemic, we are seeing that the OTC trend is significantly moving towards immune boosters. We would have seen that. People looking for zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D3, 60,000 international units, etc. Certain herbal formulations as well. And then alpha lipoic acid, these kind of things, people looking for nutraceuticals, vitamin-based and mineral-based combinations and herbal combinations is something that we see as OTC. Second, medical devices. When I say devices here, I would look at non-invasive blood pressure monitoring, thermometers. Typically, there are certain devices which are now driving, there's a lot of preference towards home monitoring. I think this is one topic we forgot to discuss in the overall discussion till now. So in addition to the entire digital transformation, telemedicine, e-pharmacy, e-lab, which has come and which has accelerated significantly in the pandemic, the one other area which has accelerated is home care as well. And we did not discuss home care as a topic at length before. So therefore, what we see is that in home care, there is a lot of home monitoring opportunity available. So therefore, several products like non-invasive blood pressure monitoring, glucometers, products like digital thermometers or even infrared thermometers, and patients with COPD or compromised lung function of any nature, there are peak flow meters available which actually help measure. It's more like a home spirometry, if you call it that way. So peak flow meters, etc. So these are some of the small point of care devices which can be easily used, and these are OTC, they don't need prescription, which actually they are available in connected format. They are available with Bluetooth feature where you can actually capture the data from this point of care device, take it onto your smartphone app, and you can actually push the data to your doctor. And then the doctor can review your report and then suitably advise the patient. So therefore, we see that the ability of patients to monitor specific vital parameters at home, the ability of home care companies to be able to have paramedics deliver certain home care services at home would certainly drive the OTC behavior also significantly. So that way, as just in a nutshell, if I were to say, clinical outcome-based data would drive, I would say, preference irrespective of whether it is a novel or whether it's a generic. And the emergence of home care and the significant adoption of home care is also what is going to drive the OTC behavior.
Thank you, Dr. Karthik. I think Mr. Anand Tirath has raised hand. Anand Tirath, sir, would you like to interact? Please unmute yourself and
Hello.
hello.
Dr. Swati, just one little more I would like to
Sure,
know
sir.
from Swati. Hello.
Yes, please.
In fact, what I was trying to know that as on today's scenario, if you see, people share everything from their pen to aeroplane on social media. And what I'm just thinking of that when the situation comes, the people start describing their symptoms and all that, and then they start mentioning in the media that this was the drug they took like this and they got cured and all that. So my question was pertaining to that. that is it not like that the restriction has to be there, that what to be shared and
Yes,
what not to be shared? Because
absolutely right.
otherwise, looking at the symptoms, anybody will start going to the counter and asking the drugs even for the serious
Correct.
ailment.
Correct.
So that is
Absolutely.
what was my question.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah, sure. So I think there in that case, what I want to mention is, I think coming from an online pharmacy experience, I can clearly tell you that every pharmacy, every online pharmacy that has a listing of pharma products has very clearly classified their catalog into RX and non-RX. RX are typically the ones which they mandate that there has to be a valid prescription. And by the way, they even go to an extent of seeing the date on the prescription. Because as all of us know, by law, a prescription is only valid for a maximum of 6 months, post which that prescription is not considered valid. It should not be considered as a valid prescription by any pharmacist, any dispensing pharmacist. So they make sure that it is compliant in terms of longevity of the prescription, and they also make sure that there is a valid prescription that's legible before it is dispensed. That being said, there is a very clear RX versus non-RX, and anything which has to be prescribed under prescription is never handed out as an OTC. It's never given out without a prescription. So that compliance and audits are very, very stringent with all standard online pharmacies. Of course, there is no such, I would say, there is no data point to prove that it is happening in a same regulated format or an auditable format in the offline pharmacies. And I think that is what brings in a lot of credibility to the Amazon and MedPlus partnership, because MedPlus having an omnipresence I would say omni-channel marketing, where they have a combination of both offline stores and an online MedPlus e-commerce portal. What Amazon will therefore be able to do is bring in that lot of credibility into the offline network as well. So therefore, I completely agree with you. There has to be a very data-backed approach to what we can dispense and what we should not dispense without a valid prescription.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mahin sir. Thank you, Dr. Karthik.
Thank you.
The forum is open for one-to-one interactions. Please.
Dr. Karthik, this is Pankaj.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. So, first of all, my compliments for the excellent presentation. Though I must say, I was also in the middle of another, session. So I was on and off. I was looking into it. So I'll once again go through the recording. But I've got a question now that a lot of e-pharmacies are coming up, and as you have mentioned about Amazon, and already we were having so many. This question keeps on coming from the pharma companies, how to give the sales crediting. There's a big problem because MedPlus, I know when I was in pharma industry, I mean, somebody used to purchase from say Hyderabad, and they will populate it down to all the nearby markets, etc. And this is a very disruptive trend which is emerging, right, for the pharma companies. So do these e-pharmacies also have got some provision by way of which if the pharma companies they want, they can provide the data so that the sales crediting accordingly can be done?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. In fact, when I was in Biocon, we used to face the same challenge of insulins being billed with a certain stockist, and then eventually this physical stock ending up in a different stockist in a very different geography of the country. And the states were almost like 2,000 kilometers away from each other, So it was like that. But we know it's a common problem in the industry. But yes, e-pharmacy fixes it with 100% precision. So I can tell you for sure that this is a great data science project that all e-pharmacy companies are doing. Of course, somebody has an edge over the other. They've started that data science earlier than the others. I can say that between e-pharmacies, there is a difference in the maturity of data, what they have. But yes, without a doubt, all the 4 major e-pharmacies which were there in the country, 1mg, NetMeds, Pharmacy, MedLife, all of them had data scientists with them. And in fact, I was overseeing one such data science project in my role with MedLife as well, where what we used to do is by pharma company, we actually used to give PIN code level data. And by the way, the data that an e-pharmacy gives is tertiary sales, as you know, because it is directly dispensed to a patient. And there can't be much better or finer level of data in terms of getting actual sales, ground level sales. So we used to give tertiary sales data to pharma companies that requested them, and we were able to give it by pin code. That actually creates a great opportunity of actually incentivizing pharma reps by the actual level of tertiary sales on the ground that actually happens, because that is the actual prescription the rep generated from his detailing effort to the doctor. So I'm sure e-pharmacy creates that great novel opportunity beyond what IQVIA or IMS can give us. And by the way, IMS does give very good secondary sales data, but yes, tertiary sales data, e-pharmacy is possibly the best bet, and all companies are actually doing it. And
so all the
pharma
companies the companies are asking for this type of data. What's the current status?
Not everyone.
Not aware right now.
Not everyone. Not everyone.
So what percentage of these companies might be asking for this type of data from like MedLife and from other e-pharmacies?
So it may differ from e-pharmacy to e-pharmacy, but from a MedLife experience, I can tell you that we had about 5 to 6 companies regularly asking us for it. So therefore, what it helped us to create is actually it helped us to create data science as a separate stream of revenue for us, because we saw a business opportunity there in actually creating a mini IMS kind of an opportunity of tertiary sales data. So therefore what we tried to do is our invoicing data from the back end, we actually started tracking it back to pin codes. And that gives us an opportunity to create a digital platform of actually tracking data brand-wise, company-wise, and you're able to actually churn it out monthly and give it out as a monthly report to the companies.
So you are charging for that?
So the e-commerce companies, e-pharmacies have not yet gone into charging separately as a subscription for it. So what typically is happening right now is it becomes a negotiation on transfer price, right? Okay. So that's the relationship that the pharma company and e-commerce companies have today on data.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pankaj sir.
Yeah, we will invite any more questions.
Yeah, this is Chandramouli here, Dr. Karthik. It's fantastic, superb presentation. Really, I mean, you had taken us in all the phases and all the explained it very nicely, beautifully. I have one question here. When it comes to e-pharmacies, actually, I'm sure like there are temperature sensitive and temperature non-sensitive products. How exactly, or what is the kind of knowledge these e-pharmacies are having? I'm sure, like, of course, non-temperature sensitive products are being given to the patients, but I'm still having my own doubts how temperature sensitive products are being handled, because there could be a case of the mishandling of the products or during the transportation, and of course this could really create some kind of patients after taking the drug. There could be some other serious conditions which we may not know. So I'm just giving a thought, like how exactly or what is the kind of knowledge information which we need to pass it on, so that
Sure. So this was one of my pet projects, I would say, because this is again a data-driven project. So I was responsible for the catalog mapping also as a part of my e-pharmacy responsibility. So I'll share that experience. So what we did is it starts with the catalog. So in the catalog, we're able to clearly mark cold chain versus non-cold chain against the brand and by composition as well, right? Now, the moment it is mapped as cold chain, what happens is the moment there is an order from a customer, from a patient for that particular brand, so immediately in every fulfillment center of the e-pharmacy, fulfillment center is nothing but like a retail center. It's like a retail warehouse. We used to have the thermocol packing, and we also used to have temperature logs maintained for each of these products once they were refrigerated, etc. So these products used to be specially packed with temperature log being maintained, and they used to be handled separately by the delivery boy. Okay, and each delivery, last fill delivery is a science in itself. Okay, there are specific data scientists in e-pharmacy companies who actually map that if at a certain time a delivery boy picks up the material from the retail store, in how much of geography or radius he can cover. So that is a science in itself. It takes Google Maps into consideration. It takes traffic into consideration. It's a very, very different technology-driven science in itself. So people used to do that and calculate how much time this particular delivery boy will take until he delivers the medicine to the last customer. Because typically one delivery boy used to take anywhere from between 15 to 20 customers material. And we always used to ensure that cold chain was delivered first. Okay, so that the ice should not melt even within the thermocol. So cold chain was always prioritized. Second thing, there were also three important checks and balances that were kept even when the material was getting inverted into the retail area. Because as e-pharmacy, we used to buy it from the distributors. So we used to buy it from stockists and distributors, and sometimes from retail chemists also if stock was not available with a stockist. So at that time, we used to check the temperature before it is taken into our inverting stock, before it comes into the inventory, and a temperature log is to be maintained from there. And these used to be audited on a monthly basis. There were surprise audits conducted at every FC for temperature logs and for every delivery that used to happen. So that way, starting from cataloging, earmarking products of as cold chain versus non-cold chain, using temperature log at the time of inventory inwarding and inventory outwarding from the fulfillment center or the retail this one, and making sure that the delivery of a cold chain customer is prioritized first over non-cold chain product customers. So care has been taken by e-pharmacies in that. So that is very, very clearly documented and auditable also.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chandramouli, for the question. The questions we are getting are really, the variety is such that it's like a 360-degree array of questions that you are getting from different aspects.
Yeah.
So, and wonderfully answered, patiently answered. So anyone else, if they want to interact one-to-one, we are open to that.
Dr. Sathi, I just want to tell you that you can't make Dr. Karthik lose his cool. I mean, we tried when we were working in MSD, we tried very hard. And I mean, there were people who used to ask 10 times, 15 times, the same thing. And with a lot of patience, he used to reply. So we always used to call him as Mr. Cool, although the sessions used to last till almost 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. So that is how Dr. Karthik is. So he will be replying very patiently to all the questions.
Yes, yes, Pankaj sir. That
Thank
and
you,
the
Pankaj
array,
sir.
the variety, the knowledge,
Yes,
the body
yes.
of knowledge that he has, that is really amazing, sir. The
Yes.
questions were from every corner. It was like he was batting, and balls were coming from all the direction. Yeah, about this, about that, about telling me.
True.
Right. So I think there are no more questions, and it was a wonderful session. I myself has learned a lot from this session. A lot of new things I have learned, and I expect the same from others also, and I believe so. So that is all from the question answer round. And any ending remarks from you, sir? Karthik sir, anything you want to?
Yeah, I mean,
Because now you're moving from that pharmacy to again to
Sure.
typical pharma, the Roche.
No,
your
so
journey.
no, I think that is very, very important for us to understand. What we understand as conventional pharma is actually has significantly transformed, and many large organizations have significantly transformed themselves. I think there is a lot of impetus given to digital, work, specifically in patient support, specifically in, I would say, customized patient support. And naturally, there is a lot of work which has also happened in digitally enabling pharma reps, right? Like how we were discussing, how can we make the communication that a medical rep will have with the doctor customized? So, and medical rep will only be able to make that discussion with the doctor customized when he knows about the customer, what his likes and dislikes are. Second, as like Salesforce.com. So Salesforce.com, Viva, as we know, are amongst the most reputed sales enabling platforms that we have in pharma. So a lot of these are actually a part of enabling Salesforce, enabling meaningful conversation between Salesforce and doctor, and enabling meaningful digitally driven healthcare service from doctor to patient. And then finally bringing it back to pharma as to how pharma can play a ecosystem role in this. So all I would say as a, I think, closing remark is once again, change is constant. And the change we are currently going through is digital transformation as healthcare professionals, as industry. And we are all important stakeholders here. Patient is a critical stakeholder. Patient has to adopt and accept technology as a new way of seeking healthcare service and healthcare products. Doctor has to accept technology as a new way of seeking information from companies, seeking information from peer groups, other doctors, and providing information and consultation to their patients. And pharma company, medical device company, and hospitals, most importantly, have to accept that technology is the way forward to not just survive but thrive. And that's, I think, my concluding remark, that we have to wholeheartedly embrace technology and thrive with it.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for the ending remarks.
Wonderfully put,
Yeah.
Dr. Karthik. Wonderfully put. This enabling platforms, technology word. How to do is people are moving, people are changing, people are confused. Also, people are trying their best. So I think through these sessions we could actually give them a bit of direction, what to do, what not to do. So
Yeah,
thank you
right.
so much for coming at this platform and sharing with us your views about digital opinion leaders. Basically, after going through this session, I'm getting two full forms for DOL. It is digital opinion leaders, and the second one I would say it is data opinion leaders. Because
Sure.
what is actually happening is data. Data is the king today, and every company or every strategist, marketer would be thinking about how to utilize the data, from where to get it, and then how to utilize that data. In this session, we talked about a lot of things, proper KYC, one thing that is personalized communication of your KOLs, making them digitally aware, literally teaching them how to build up their digital profiles, helping them out. I would rather say not only your doctors, your KOLs, your team members, your pharma professionals, they should be digitally aware. They should be, first of all, knowing what actually to put to doctors, how to communicate, what is the meaning of a WhatsApp update, what is the meaning of WhatsApp status, what is the meaning of putting a content on Facebook, or what is the use of creating a video or a video blog or a LinkedIn profile. So these things have to be understood properly, data based. These all should be data based. And I would rather conclude this because there was a lot of variety in this session. So this is what I could catch upon. And I hope many of us would be viewing this session again and again, because there was so much content that I would take out, 1 hour for each slide. Yeah, what was it? What was there in this slide? What was there in that slide? So thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Karthik, for
Dr.
being
Swati,
here.
Dr.
Yes,
Swati, just if you allow me, please.
sure,
Uh,
Mansoor.
a minute. What I would like to say, thanks, Dr. Karthik, and it was a real value addition to at our platform with this kind of delivery of this webinar.
Thank you very
And
much.
I believe time and technology are the two things where we have to maintain the pace and match the pace always. Correct.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you.
what Dr. Karthik said, it was the real thing. I really felt delighted because what he said that before visit to a doctor or a professional, you go through his LinkedIn profile. But when I used to work as a medical rep, as a first line manager, my that time these kind of things were not available. But the basics were the same. Because suppose if I find any doctor in the first day, first show of the movie, then I was rest for sure that he is an adventurous kind of customer. So I have always launched my new product to those kind of doctors. And believe my words, 90% time I got success. So this is how
Yes.
you have to know your customer, and this is how you have to place your products for the marketing. So these are the things really. Only thing, the time has changed, the technology has changed, but the basics are there only, correct or not? So
Absolutely
this
right.
is what I really appreciate, and this is one thing that we got lot of knowledge. Time and technology, two things. We will have to maintain the pace. Thank you very much, Dr. Karthik.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Mayan
much.
sir, for your inputs. So we will be watching this space since big players like Amazon and Reliance have entered this space. Consolidation is going on. We shall be watching it, and we shall be arranging a session again on this special topic. And Dr. Karthik, I would invite you to be on the panel through
Sure.
this session only.
Thank you.
So this is all from our side, from Farmer State. Uh, Thank you for attending. The participants need a special mention here because your questions made it more relevant of what was discussed in this session. So thank you, participants, from the bottom of our hearts. And I would say now we are ending this session. stay with us, stay connected with us. We shall be bringing more such sessions for you.
Thank you, Swati. Thank you, Dr. Karthik.
Thank you, Dr. Swati.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great. Nice session. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.